Doing my presentation. I would like to welcome you all here. Thanks for joining. I will be talking about the headless approach and the thing called Acquia and what issues we had when we wanted to have this connection, we wanted to give a try to headless approach in the Acquia setup. So this is the main topic of this speech that I will be giving right now. And for those who do not remember, my name is Chris. I am a person, and I love PHP and Drupal and stuff like that. And you can find me on social networks, LinkedIn especially. I'm open to all feedback, questions, answer, stuff like that. So if you do not get the opportunity to speak to me today, you can always find me here. So a few more words about me. It's like I'm a philosopher and developer in one person. I have 2 degrees. I am very fond of the clean code. I have over 10 years of experience in the matter. I'm CTO currently at Code Sushi, and I love doing code reviews. So, what we are going to be talking about today. So, basically, I wanted to explain what is a headless approach, especially what was the project. This is more like a lightweight talk. It's more of this talk like embrace your failure talk, and I will be just like explaining what we did, what went wrong, what went good, and close it with some conclusions about headless approach and platform as a service, things like Acquia or Pantheon. And this is more of general idea for this talk. So let's start with explaining what is headless approach. So headless approach takes Drupal and treats it as a backend, or maybe just backend as a service. It by using the REST API functionality in Drupal 8 or installing a REST API module for Drupal 7, you can turn Drupal into something which will be more like, Contentful. Contentful is like just like headless CMS, which gives only the API and the backend service for whatever reasons you want. And you can turn Drupal into something like this by enabling API in the 8 and installing proper module in 7. Then you have the front-end website, which is coded, which is created in any technology. For example, you can use PHP, you can use JavaScript, you can use even Ruby for that purpose. And the thing that connects the front end to the back end is REST API. So the front end, the Drupal is again reduced to the backend as a service, and the front end fetches that data, presents it, and all looks pretty well. So every approach has the pros and the cons. Here are the pros of headless approach. It's like I already talked about this. You can use anything for the front end. You can use whatever technology. The front end does not have to conform to the Drupal things like in front end. Drupal has some requirements regarding the front end, and by using a headless approach, you don't have to conform to that. And this can speed up the development time by splitting the work between the front-end development team and the back-end development team. So we just give the front-end the documentation to the API, which is like currently public by Drupal, so they can just pick up work. They can implement all the features basing on the API that Drupal provides. And this can be done while the backend team is working on like putting the Drupal in proper state, adding the proper content types, and things like that. In this approach, you can even use the mock API services, which just will return JSON, and you can like give those JSON to front-end team, and unless you are having this contract between front-end and back-end in place, you can work totally in parallel. But every technology has its downside, and headless as well has its downsides. First of all, we reduce the Drupal to merely content storage. We lose all the out-of-the-box Drupal functionalities for front-end development. For example, no way of having all these front-end debugging tools, no live preview, no live edit. Some modules may not work in this kind of setup. And as well, it can be confusing to the clients or to the end customers of the website, because imagine that Drupal is on another subdomain, and front-end application is on some other domain, and the client has some troubles realizing that this is the same instance, and he can go to the other address and make some changes, and then the changes will appear somewhere else. So, what we planned. Basically, we had this big project coming to us. We had a really big website written in Drupal 7, and it was kind of specific because this project was having troubles with the history, because there was one development team working on it, then was the other, and actually we end up maintaining the big website, which having over 2,000 of nodes, 2,000 of articles, so it was kind of big. And the client wanted us to make a transition from Drupal 7, which was kind of custom-made, with custom-made modules, custom-made flow for this website. He wanted us to make a transition to the Drupal 8. And he also wanted to have something like from the bleeding edge of technology. So we came up to him and told him that there is this awesome new thing. It's called headless approach. We can use very modern front-end technologies with that. And he said, okay, let's give it a try. I have some smaller project within this website, which can be separated as totally separate website. That website was something more than a bit more than a landing page. It has some articles, some blog posts, some slider images, pretty basic website which we decided to implement in the Drupal 8, and we decided to make it headless. So this would allow us to test and validate the headless approach and then deploy it to Acquia. This was not our choice. Client already had this huge website hosted on Acquia, and he decided not to change the hosting provider. Everybody knows what Acquia is. Who have not heard about Acquia? Nobody. So I don't have to explain what is it. So we basically made some concept like this. For front end, we will select the technology that we are most familiar with, which at the time was Symfony. So that's why we choose Silex framework. And aside that, we decided to use Silex because it's like fat-free version of Symfony. We also took a Gazelle as a HTTP client. And our basic setup was Silex, Twig as a templating engine, and Gazelle. We created some basic front-end templates in Twig. We then connected it with the Silex. First we used some mocked data, and then we decided to heavily use the HTTP cache, and then we made to the Drupal side. Obviously we needed to install Drupal 8, so we did. We also needed to enable the REST API for Drupal, so we did. And then it turns out that by default Drupal, the API does not conform to our needs, because we needed it to be kind of efficient, but with the standard Drupal API, we would have to make at least a couple of calls to render one page, sorry. And that was kind of not acceptable. So we wrote a custom module which would take the data, make it to our, like what we needed. So one call would return us all the data that we need to render the page. And we made some simple amendments to the Drupal admin UI. So, for example, when the user hit preview button, it will go to the headless part, render it, so the user will actually see the thing that is being rendered by the front-end part itself. Couple of technical things. It was like all-in-one repository. It was standard Drupal repository layout. We made only a subdirectory for the front-end part, and we created a proper htaccess, which routed the everything, not Drupal admin or Drupal API related to the front-end part where it got handled. So, then something went wrong. Actually, it was like kind of odd story because we completed the project, we deployed it to Acquia, and then like in every other project, it goes for some sort of cold storage for a bit, like it's like the developer have to forget everything about the project, and then clients start to test it. So we obviously like delivered the project, gave the keys to the house, and went and waited for response. And then client calls us and says the site isn't working. We said, why? It was working yesterday. Now it's not working. So the investigation process have started. On our setup, which we did like the regular setup, we even like put it in the Docker container, and everything went okay, was okay, but on Acquia, site died, and it died to the point that you have to restart the whole server to get it back online. There was no other way. It either like restart or it will be dead. And if you restart it, it will be working for sometimes couple of hours, couple of days, and then died again. So we came to conclusion that this was kind of Acquia's fault, because we had like proof that there's nothing wrong with our code on different setup. There was something wrong with our code and Acquia. Acquia obviously is not a bad solution. It's actually kind of great. They do a lot of stuff for you. You don't have to worry about lots of stuff. But there's some sort of trade-off for that. This trade-off is related to you have a lack of control of your environment. So if they decide this is the best setup for Drupal, you have nothing to say. You can only fiddle with a couple of settings in the control panel, but not much really. And their support, when we like contacted them, hey guys, what's going on? Can you help us? Was not familiar with our concept. We're not familiar with the headless part, the headless concept. And it turned out that there was some really weird settings that we cannot change without changing the server itself. So, as I said, the symptoms were the page died, and the cause was limit of processes. Acquia has this setting that basically they have this big equation. They took the parameters of the server, how big the server is, how much RAM does it have, and stuff like that. And they calculate how much, also how many environments you have, how many applications you have on this server, and they calculate how much processes of PHP can you run. And it turned out that when we have our setup of PHP application calling Drupal API, first the application run one process, then the next call to the Drupal created another process, and it was like taking two processes per one request. It sufficed that just another one user hitting the page in the same way, in the same time, could cause another two processes, which exceeded the value of this setting, which was at the time 3, and caused the PHP to fail. And the only other thing that could restore the website was calling the support and telling them to restart the PHP service itself. So, support, we have like a couple of calls with them. They were really helpful. They tried to help us locate the problems. They analyzed the logs with us. It was like super professional, but they did not provide us with any solution for this problem. They just like told us it's not our way of doing Drupal. Please figure out yourself. So we did figure out some solutions, some solution with them. First of all was increasing the usage of caching. And second of all, we asked them to switch PHP version to 7. And they did. And PHP version 7 is more performant than 5. So it was less probable that two simultaneous requests would cause this problem. And it's working for now. So now a couple of lessons from that experience is like headless approach is cool, it's fun, it has its benefits, and it has its dark side, and it can be difficult with platform as a service. We have the problem with Acquia, but probably we would have some sort of problem if we would deploy it to Pantheon. And the main lesson from that is, first of all, you need to mind the environment, check what's going on with the environment for the place where you will be deploying this application, because there can be some hidden traps there. So that's all for now. Thank you, and if you have any questions, I'm really open to answer any of them. Okay.
Nobody have questions.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for a great presentation. This is certificate.
Yeah, thank you.